Joining me right now is U.S. Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia. And Secretary, it's wonderful to have you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for all your hard work in getting us back here.
Thank you, Marie. It's a pleasure to be back. And yeah, those are difficult numbers to hear, that 4.4 million number we announced yesterday, and as you said, more than 26 million unemployed now just over the last 5 weeks. That's hard. We know. It reflects to many Americans and families making a difficult sacrifice right now. We are doing all we can to help.
What kind of a snapback are you expecting, or are you expecting a rolling comeback? I mean, some people say, oh, well, once we get through this, we'll have a snapback growth number in the fourth quarter. Others say it's going to take a lot longer, and you're looking at sort of a creeping growth story for the next year. How do you see it?
I'm optimistic that we can get back from this more quickly than we have from economic downturns in the past, Maria. The unemployment numbers, again, they're really very high, much higher than we've seen in years past, but it's got a very different cause. It was caused by a health crisis, not by problems in the underlying fundamentals. As you know, we discussed in the past, our economy was just exceptionally strong even 6 weeks ago. And a lot of the fundamentals that we had then are in place. The policies we had then, they're in place. It's a matter of getting past this virus and reopening. And I think there's reason for more optimism than in past downturns.
Well, it's certainly, since you and your colleagues, along with the Federal Reserve, are throwing money at this economy, flooding the economy with cash, and yet there are still questions and issues around the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. I spoke with Senator Lindsey Graham about these issues recently, the Paycheck Protection Program and employees in his state. Listen to what he said to me on Sunday. How are things going, Senator?
It's getting better. There are more loans going out the door. It's a good program. The goal of the program is to keep small businesses from going bankrupt because they're having to be shut down to deal with mitigation. And the forgiveness comes if the employer borrows the money and keeps people on the payroll. The goal of the program, for forgiveness sakes, is to keep people from going on unemployment. Here's the problem. In South Carolina, you're getting $23 an hour to be unemployed. A lot of these businesses pay $15 and $16 an hour to their employees.
So what about that, Secretary? Well, the president is trying to reopen the economy in certain states in the next couple of weeks. You've got people making more money to stay home rather than being on the job. Why would they come back to work at a restaurant or a hotel or a service business if they're making more money to stay home? And that program is in place until July 31st.
Well, let me say first that I share the senator's enthusiasm for the Paycheck Protection Program. To me, as Labor Secretary, what's so promising about that program is it's a way of keeping employees attached to employers. It's part of the snapback we were just talking about, Maria. It positions us better if we can help those companies not just stay afloat, but keep their workers on payroll. And obviously, I'm very pleased that has now been given this additional funding that the president will sign today. With respect to the unemployment issue that the senator raises, we thought it was important to make an enhanced unemployment benefit available to these millions of people we were just talking about who are out of work. But of course, the states will want to carefully administer these programs and make sure that the people receiving unemployment benefits are people who don't have an opportunity to work. Unemployment is not available for people who have been called back to their job, for example. And so we'll keep an eye on that as well.
Yeah. But two issues. I mean, number one, this time frame of 8 weeks. In order for a business to get the loan forgiven, you got to get that money out within 8 weeks, give it to your employees. That's not going to help that business stay afloat. You know that. They don't have any demand. They're in a shutdown. So are you considering loosening up that 8-week period? Because if I'm a small business, I take that money and the clock starts ticking, I give it to my employees, I'm still going to go bankrupt when all of this is over because I don't have any demand. So are you willing to look at that 75-25 makeup and that 8-week time frame and change that, loosen that up?
Well, I think this program stands out for how successful it's been, Maria. I want to emphasize that. This program was stood up in a week. Within 2 weeks, there had been, I believe, 1.6 million in loans made. Not every aspect of it was perfect, and that's always going to be true when such a large program is put in place so quickly.
Right.
But obviously, small business thinks it's extremely valuable, and now we've got another $310 billion in funding for it. That said, I think.
But how much of that money, Secretary? How much of that money is already committed? I mean, the first tranche, the $350 billion, went out the door pretty quickly, and now you got another tranche of $310 billion, $320 billion, and yet I'm understanding that a lot of that is committed already. So is that going to run out of money in the next couple of days as well?
I don't have those figures, Maria. As you know, SBA administers the program. We do know that there are additional loans that people have already lined up for, which again is a testament to how positively small business views the program. This additional infusion is going to be so important to businesses, and we'll see what happens as those funds are now dispersed and taken. But the fact that we've had so many businesses so eager to get into this program, to me, is promising as Labor Secretary. It means that many more employees who have the chance to stay on payroll and the chance to get back to work as we reopen the economy, as the president laid out last week. And I think we're now seeing states preparing to turn that corner, and we're obviously very prepared to help them do that.
Secretary, I want to ask you about the thrift fund, because we speak so much about China, and I know that the Labor Department oversees this. This is $500 billion in 401k money of our military, past and present. That is the thrift fund. And this new move to send 10% of that money to invest in the MSCI index, where you have a whole host of Chinese companies. You've got a number of congressmen pushing back on this. Congressman Waltz sponsoring a bill first proposed by former Representative Mark Meadows, now President Trump's chief of staff, that would prevent those retirement funds from being invested in Chinese companies. Some of these companies are building weaponry that may very well end up being the same weapons that go against the United States to try to overtake us as the #1 superpower. This is the thrift savings plan, saying that when service members put money into their 401k, that money is being invested in Beijing and used for Chinese ship and plane building. You've got one company within the MSCI index, which is the company that provides the tracking for the Uyghurs, the 1 million Uyghurs that are in camps right now in China. Should our military men and women, past and present, be funding China's military?
Maria, the thrift savings plan, which, as you say, is sort of the 401k savings plan for federal employees, is overseen by a board of directors that's in place. We at the Department of Labor have a sort of auditing role and a limited oversight role. It's not an agency within our department. The issue that you identify is one that I know has caused concern to members of Congress and is, as you say, now getting a closer look by some as a result of where that money is going. And then it's the money investment funds of not just American retirees, but often men and women in uniform. So, as you say, members of Congress are asking questions about it, and it's getting a closer look, and we'll see whether the board has any further thoughts about that investment decision that they made. What they did was they put a new international fund among the investment options available in that plan.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it deserves a closer look, Secretary, just given the fact that we are looking at the second largest economy, China, wanting to overtake the United States. The Communist Party is doing everything that it can to beat the U.S., whether it's in the economy or even in the military. And to have the 401k money of our military, past and present, investing and funding in this MSCI, I don't even know if they're aware of that, but certainly people should understand what that 10%, $50 billion is going to be invested in, given that it is invested in Chinese companies that are tracking citizens, that are creating and building machinery that the military will use. So it's a fair question, right?
I think the questions that you're raising, Maria, are questions that have been raised by members of Congress as well. And what I would say more generally is as we address the coronavirus and attempt to come out of some of the challenges it's presented, I think we'll be reevaluating where our nation's investments are made in a variety of contexts, and reassessing our dependence on other nations, including China, maybe particularly China, So I think the questions you're raising are questions that others are asking as well.
All right, Secretary, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much, and thanks for your leadership. Secretary Eugene Scalia joining us this morning in Washington. Thank you, sir.